We are getting closer to the end of the college football season. It's hard to believe we're already in week 11, the second week of November, my favorite time of the year in college football, because that's when a lot of these big teams, they start to lose. They start to go on upset alert. Because the closer you get to the championship stage, the more pressure these teams feel, and they can't handle the pressure. So let's get right into the Week 11 predictions. Before we get to that, 6-4 last week. Not really my best performance of the year, but it's also not my worst either. 6-4, that's kind of decent. I'll take it and move on. Also went 3-2 against the spread last week, so again, same for that. Not my best performance, but not my worst performance either. So I'm going to take it, and I'm going to move on to this week. So as you guys know, the picks against the spread for college football and NFL will all be on one video, either tomorrow or Wednesday, one of the two. Alright, so let's get right into these Week 11 predictions. And we right away start off with what probably will be a good matchup by the time this thing gets over with. Number 23 Fresno State versus Boise State. And I know these rankings, they haven't really changed because the only rankings we focus on now are the college football playoff ones. But just bear with me, these are what the rankings were when I'm doing this video. Wasn't going to wait till Tuesday, till after the rankings were revealed. So, number 23 Fresno State versus Boise State. And I'm going to pick an upset. I'm going to pick Boise State to pull off this win over Fresno State. Because I haven't really seen Fresno State play all season long. But I've seen a little bit out of Boise State. So I'll take Boise State. Next, number 10 Ohio State versus Michigan State. The Buckeyes are looking to keep their playoff hopes alive and their championship hopes alive. And I think they will survive this week. Although I do think it's going to be difficult to get it done. As if a couple things go differently in the game last week, they probably end up losing to Nebraska. But I think the Buckeyes will survive this week. Whether or not they survive after that is not up to me. But we'll see. So I think the Buckeyes survive this week. In a close game. I'm almost interested to see what the line for this game is going to be. But moving on. Wisconsin versus number 14 Penn State. Penn State got absolutely embarrassed by Michigan in the Big House. And they're looking to respond against the Badgers, who have really underachieved so far this season. And I will pick Penn State to rebound in Happy Valley. I just feel like Wisconsin's been a disappointment this whole season. They've really underachieved, and I'm going to pick Penn State to recover and salvage what they can left of the season, maybe get into a decent bowl game. Next, number 18 Mississippi State versus number 1 Alabama. And it's going to be interesting to see where Mississippi State gets ranked in the College Football Playoff Committee ranking based off of what they need Alabama to probably have to win. So it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. But it's not going to matter. Let's just face it. Alabama just shut out the number 3 team in the country last week at that point. 29-0. It's beyond me of what they're going to do this week. The Tide are going to continue to rule. And it's unfortunate for people that really want to see some parity in college football. But there's no parity this time. I think Alabama wins huge. Next, Oklahoma State versus number 7 Oklahoma. And I think this game is going to be a shootout. I think this is a game where Oklahoma's going to have to win. Oklahoma really kind of struggled a little bit against Texas Tech, but they pulled it out in the end. And this might be another game like it, because the Big 12, it's not known for defense. I think Oklahoma State's going to get a significant amount of points on the board. But I think Oklahoma wins this in the end. I think it's going to be very high scoring. But I think the Sooners win, and they survive elimination this week. Next, we got Northwestern, who really put up a fight against Notre Dame, but they just couldn't pull it out in the end. They came back from 17 down to bring it within 3, but ultimately their defense couldn't get them one more stop. Versus Iowa, who lost a heartbreaker last week to Purdue. But there is still some hope for Iowa. Northwestern is in control of their own destiny to maybe get to the Big Ten championship game and potentially win it and get to a New Year's Six game, probably the Rose Bowl. Well, most likely the Rose Bowl, but I think Iowa is going to win this game. I just feel like Iowa's playing with a chip on their shoulder. This is 2 weeks in a row now where Iowa has had heartbreaking losses. And I think they play the chip on their shoulder. They know that they're still alive in this Big Ten West. And I think they pull off the win over Northwestern. Next, we got number 8 Washington State versus Colorado. And this is another game where I think it's going to be a game where Washington State will have to maybe find their way to win again this week. They got to find a way to win, just like they did last week against Cal. Only a 19-13 victory. And you could argue and say that Colorado is a much better team than Cal. Colorado was undefeated at some point, but ever since that, it's just kind of fallen off a bit. But I think this could be a shootout as well. But I feel like Washington State will be able to win this one. Whether it's handily or not, we'll find out. But I think Washington State with quarterback Gardner Minshew, who is one of, if not the best quarterback in FBS statistically, I think they will get the win. I feel like this is probably going to be an offensive battle. It looks like it could be on paper, but I just feel like that Washington State defense is very underrated and underappreciated. I think the Cougars get the win, and they keep their playoff hopes alive this week. Next, we've got Auburn versus number 6 Georgia. Last year, Auburn just completely, they handed it to Georgia in November last year. They really handed it to them when they were number 1. But Georgia came back in the SEC championship game, and they pretty much payback, revenge. But I think this is kind of a two-part revenge. Auburn is coming off an emotional victory, a game where they were down by 10 with 5 minutes left against Texas A&M. And they came back and won. So I think Georgia, they're coming off another big win, the second big win in a row. I think Georgia has momentum right now. They have confidence. Georgia's been in this position before where they've had one loss and they've had to win out to get to the college football playoff. They just did it last year. So Georgia has been there before. Auburn can play spoiler at this point, but I don't think it gets spoiled this week. I think Georgia wins this one. I think they actually win it pretty convincingly. I think they win by more than double digits. I'm going to say by at least 17 points. But the question is, can Georgia win out? That will be the question as we face throughout these next 4 to 5 weeks. So I think the Bulldogs survive elimination this week. Next, we've got Florida State versus number 4 Notre Dame. Preseason, this matchup would have looked to be a very hyped up matchup. This could have been the game of the week. But Florida State has just struggled all season long. And Notre Dame, they keep on winning games. They're like the Miami of this season. I'm telling people that Notre Dame might lose at some point this season before the playoff and miss it. But I unfortunately don't think it's going to be this week. I feel like Florida State could probably keep this game close for a little while, but Notre Dame will probably pull away. Although Notre Dame has struggled to close out games, like close them out convincingly, and they've had to win them close, like Ball State and Vandy. I think the Irish get the win this week. It's to be determined how much I think it's going to be by, but I think the Irish win, and they keep their playoff hopes alive. And finally, the game of the week, number 2 Clemson versus number 22 Boston College. This is Clemson's last big test, in my opinion, until the college football playoff. I think if Clemson wins this game, I feel like it's very safe to put them in the college football playoff because their remaining schedule looks easy on paper. But maybe the reality of that could change. Kind of just like what I said in the playoff ranking video that I did as we did the scenarios on that board behind me. That one right there. That Clemson versus Boston College, I felt like that all week we're going to hear about, ooh, Boston College can win this game if they get to the quarterback. This is going to be a hostile environment for Trevor Lawrence, the freshman quarterback. It's going to be a very hostile environment. Game day is going to be there. The students, they're going to be screaming. The crowd will be fired up for this game. They know what they can do. They could play spoiler to Clemson's national championship or playoff hopes potentially. And we're probably going to hear that all week. We're probably going to hear about how underrated Boston College's running game is. We're going to hear about how underrated their front seven is. We're probably going to hear that all week long. But against a rival like Florida State and a big test like NC State, they had their challenges that were being portrayed that whole week, and Clemson ended up dominating this game. And I think in those games, I think it's going to happen again. I think Clemson dominates this game. I feel like Boston College doesn't really have a chance in this one. I feel like Clemson is going to win this game by at least 21 points. I just feel like Boston College isn't as good as what what everyone's trying to emphasize. I don't see what the deal is with Boston College. Sure, they have an underrated running game and maybe underrated defense, but they haven't really played an offense like Clemson so far this season. And they played an offense like Purdue's, and they got blown out. So I get that you want to hype up this matchup as much as you want, but I think Clemson wins this game by at least 21 points. In fact, I'll be surprised if it's a one-possession game. I'll be surprised if Clemson's trailing at halftime. I'll be surprised if Clemson only leads by 7 in the fourth quarter. I'll be surprised if Boston College beats the spread. I'll be surprised. So I think Clemson blows out Boston College and they keep their quote-unquote playoff hopes alive. So those are my picks this week for Week 11. As you can see, I don't really have upsets taking place. I feel like everyone's going to survive this week, but they're going to have to earn it. Although I will tell you, if there is a team that I think may lose this week, it could be either Ohio State or it could be Oklahoma. One of those two might lose. Maybe Washington State could. Because Washington State really struggled last week in their game against Cal. And they had a big lead against Oregon, but they kind of let Oregon get back into the game. And Oklahoma, if this game gets into a shootout, Kyler Murray's going to have to put some pressure on himself. I know that Oklahoma can handle shootouts pretty well. They did come back by 21 to tie it up against Texas, but they lost in the waning seconds. I feel like Oklahoma State has to get off to a good start against Oklahoma if they're going to have a chance. And Ohio State, maybe, if anybody loses in the top 10, I think it's going to be Ohio State. Because Michigan State, they have been another team that has underachieved. A lot of people thought that Notre Dame could be a playoff contender with all those returning starters coming back. Almost your entire starting lineup from a year ago coming back for another season. And they've disappointed. They just haven't been up to the challenge this season. But what could make their season is pulling off an upset and ruining Ohio State's playoff chances. That could be the mentality that Michigan State could play. They could play spoiler in this situation. I think they will strive for that, but I think the Buckeyes will end up winning that game close. But it won't surprise me if the Spartans do end up winning this game. And Washington State, they could ultimately go down to Colorado, but I may not see that happening. I could also see Oklahoma maybe losing this one, especially if Oklahoma State scores at will, kind of like what they did in the first 3 quarters against Texas. Because against the Longhorns, they seem to score at will. So those are my Week 11 picks. I will see you back tomorrow for the College Football Playoff Committee ranking reaction. Also have the NFL predictions this week. We'll have picks against the spread for college and NFL. I will see you then. And as always, like, share, and subscribe.